Hello and welcome to episode 18 of the Nostalgia Bubble podcast, the show where two lifelong best friends celebrate the movies that they love. I'm one of your hosts, Shuggy, an amateur film reviewer and nerd.
And I am Nye, nerd and amateur film reviewer.
Hey!
Slowly but surely converting me.
hey, I think, you've now done 17 in-depth film reviews.
Yeah, I've been editing them and I question...
This is why we're amateur, we're not very good at it.
Yeah, so this episode was my pick.
Yeah.
And I chose Mystery Men.
I think this is the first film we've done that I haven't seen at all.
Really?
I think so.
I am intrigued to hear what you thought. It was definitely a different experience going back and watching it this time.
Yeah.
But I would like to hear what you thought first.
I thought the film was absolutely fine. Like, just the most okay late 90s, early 2000s comedy that there was.
Yeah, I mean... Coming from you, that's not bad.
Yeah, it's Ben Stiller, his kind of comedies of that era, like the whole kind of Paul Feig era of comedy is not necessarily my vibe. You know, the whole Steve Carell boom. The one exception being Anchorman, the original Anchorman.
Yeah. What I would praise you on is your ability to differentiate between a film that you like and recognising that it's a good film.
Yeah.
With this one, it is... certainly an average film. Watching it back, I think maybe at the time of watching it was part of that era, you know. So, and I think obviously being at a certain age, finding it hilarious probably came more naturally to me than it would at my age now.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some really good jokes in there. Like, I definitely got some laughs out of it. I know, like Mark Kermode, who's one of the biggest film critics in the UK, he has like a 6 laugh test. And I'd say this past that. Like, I think I got, a good number of laughs in there. I don't think it's consistent. And I think there was a period somewhere in the middle where I did feel it kind of dragging a little.
I definitely got my laughs in there as well. And for me, it was just kind of nice to rewatch it. After so long wanting to. It was interesting seeing how, obviously naturally I found different things funny.
Yeah.
This time round, and actually one of the best things was being able to see actors that since watching the film I had become familiar with.
People like William H. Macy.
Yeah, and also I was gonna say actually Hank Azaria.
Yeah, I mean Simpsons legend Hank Azaria.
Yeah, but I mean obviously I didn't have the face to put to the name when watching The Simpsons, but yeah, I think just kind of being able to watch it back knowing and kind of having seen the actors elsewhere, and it wasn't just sort of about Ben Stiller.
Oh yeah, no, this cast is insanely good. Jean Garofalo, big fan of hers. As I say, William H. Macy. Not necessarily the biggest fan, but Paul Rubens, who's like Pee-wee. Jeffrey Rush. Tom Waits. I don't know why how they got Tom Waits, but Tom Waits is in it. Eddie Izzard, who is my favourite stand-up comedian of all time.
Love Eddie Izzard.
Yeah, the cast is incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's a brilliant cast, and I think they kind of, at times, maybe held it together.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just kind of nice to revisit a film that I hadn't seen for ages and enjoy it from a different perspective. And again, like similarly to what you were saying, it definitely did make me laugh.
All right, I'm going to go do a little bit of pre-production here.
Mm-hmm.
So the film was originally pitched in a couple of years before it came out in '97, by Mike Richardson, who was a publisher at Dark Horse Comics, which is relevant because, among other things, they're the people responsible for the Hellboy comics.
Okay, so there is a slight crossover.
We've got a few crossovers. Specifically, they also produced the movies, and he pitched that to produce at Universal, and they thought that the characters were really relatable, despite the kind of surreal sensibilities of the world and the work of Bob Burden, who we're going to talk about now, because Bob Burden created a comic series called Flaming Carrot Comics, and this film is a kind of a loose adaptation of that. Specifically, the Mystery Men first appeared in them in 1987, so some 10 years before they pitched this film. And at one point, they did prove popular enough for Dark Horse to give them their own comic series, and it lasted a whole 4 issues. Don't think that sold too
Brilliant.
well. So it got greenlit, and it was kind of part of that late 90s, early 2000s wave of superhero films, So, your Blades, your X-Men, your Fantastic Fours, Hellboy, Daredevil, that kind of kick-started the superhero resurgence that didn't really take off until like the MCU became the biggest thing on the planet. So it was kind of part of that. There were a bunch of others that like were greenlit and didn't end up coming to screen. Superman Lives being like one of the most notable ones, but yeah, there was a ton. So the original person that they went to try and get to direct was Danny DeVito.
Okay. That wasn't the name I was expecting to hear.
He was originally in talks to star and produce, and those talks broke down over disagreements on who would get to produce the soundtrack, which apparently was a deal breaker for DeVito if he didn't get like control of the soundtrack.
Okay. That's interesting listening back to the soundtrack now.
It is our second film to feature Smash Mouth's All-Star.
Yes, it is. A wave of nostalgia back to episode 1.
Yeah. So then they turned to Ben Stiller, asked him to rewrite the script and direct the film. I think he'd done a little bit of directing at this point. And he actually turned them down because he said it was like too big a movie for him. He eventually was convinced to appear in the film by Jean Garofalo after she signed on. And when he signed on to act, he was offered the role of Blue Raja, but he didn't want that because he didn't want to play another nerdy guy. He wanted to do something different to kind of what he was being known for. So the director they actually got was someone called Kinka Usher, and he was known for directing adverts, or commercials as they call them in America. There's a fairly well-known one called Got Milk, which has kind of had a new small wave of relevancy because it was heavily referenced in an episode of Rick and Morty, which is the only reason I've heard of it. But yeah, he wasn't a guy known for doing films, he was a guy known for doing commercials.
Okay, interesting. I probably don't have the nous for it, but did you see any sort of reference or any kind of remnants of that experience?
I don't know if I saw references or remnants. The directing was one of the bits that left me a bit uninspired.
Okay.
And I think it was directorial choices. Like, he mentioned that they often at times they wanted to try and make it feel like a comic book, so they went for a very flat kind of cinematography. And it was when they were including lots of like close-ups of face, like perspective close-ups, and they would cut between the two. That didn't really do it for me at all.
Yeah, there was a point where Shoveler was having a chat with his wife, and it was kind of it was very point of view based, and it just did feel a little bit out of keeping with the rest of the film.
I think it kind of, there was some in the opening action sequence as well, or like kind of sequences before, and then after that it stopped, and I think after that the direction was just solid. Like, but those bits like stood out to me as being just they didn't fit, as you say. It didn't quite feel in keeping with what was going on. So what Stiller had to say about the script was that it was kind of pretty fluid. The director would basically let the comedic actors go off and kind of off script and do their own stuff, improvise quite heavily. And people like Stiller and Garofalo and Rubens and Azaria, they all were quite involved in forming their characters, taking them in their own direction. Like, originally I think Mr. Furious was probably meant to be a bit stronger than he is through most of the film, but it was like Ben Stiller's decision to like have him be the weakest member of the team for most of the film. Yeah, and just stuff like that. Like, they were all very hands-on, involved in their characters, more like it'd be in just like kind of a run-of-the-mill real-world kind of sitcom. Yeah, that's kind of all I've got. Not too much. Kind of a few interesting directorial choices that never came to be. It would have been very interesting to see Danny DeVito star in it. I'm not sure who he'd have played.
I couldn't think immediately.
No.
I mean, maybe Spleen?
You know what? I could almost see Spleen, yeah. The way he kind of debases himself on It's Always Sunny with such glee, I could definitely see it.
Yeah, so the opening scene is exposition, really, isn't it? That whole opening scene sets up the relationships.
With the attack on the party.
Yeah.
I got huge Joel Schumacher Batman vibes from that. Like Batman Forever kind of
Right.
vibes.
You could definitely see. I think the whole thing felt very derivative of kind of the Gotham scene.
Yeah, and maybe that's why the film doesn't necessarily quite do it for me. Is that like the last couple of films there, like Batman and Robin is like a cult film for being so bad it's good. It's already almost a parody Batman film.
Yeah, that might also be on my list somewhere, but we'll talk about that another day.
Got some interesting tidbits on that one. It will just be terrible Arnold Schwarzenegger cold puns the entire episode.
Right, well, that'll be my challenge to you, like I couldn't impersonate Borat.
I'll buy you dinner. I'm not as strong.
Yeah, I mean, it did feel very, as I said, very derivative of kind of the Gotham world. But yeah, that opening scene for me was very easy bit of kind of exposition. I think the most interesting, obviously, you kind of see how useless everyone is.
Yeah.
I mean, I did quite. One thing I think they did quite well was that Mr. Furious, his kind of failure to be furious, it was a running joke through the whole film, but I feel like they didn't overdo it. It could have been something that could have been very easily overplayed and sort of overdone, but I feel like they kind of struck a good balance there.
Yeah, I agree.
And obviously that's where you kind of meet Captain Amazing, who is obviously feels like a poor person's Captain America.
Yeah, if Captain America was more concerned with sponsorship and making money and fame than actually helping people.
With him, with his character, I sort of got like a crossover between Captain America and Homelander from The Boys.
Oh yeah, I could see that comparison.
Yeah, like it was never quite clear whether Captain Amazing was intrinsically good.
Yeah, I mean, I think he potentially is the most interesting character in the film to me. Like, did he start out as a good intentioned, he was in it to save people, and then get suckered in by the commercialization and the fame? Or did he get into it for the commercialization and the fame? Like, he has motivations that could have been fun to be explored, but he's pretty non-existent. But there's a lot of great jokes, super bad jokes with the... It can't be him. You know, what is it, Lance? Is that his alter ego?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, Lance wears Lance wears glasses, and Captain also Amazing doesn't.
I think with that character in particular, like the one question that came to mind was like he fought Frankenstein and initially put him away, and then just so easily kind of got duped, and there's kind of like the whole bit about him being predictable when he gets knocked out and stuff, and it did make me kind of question, was he always easily tricked, or was he at one point a kind of more inspired and possibly sharper witted superhero?
Yeah, like kind of the whole reason like the film takes place is that he essentially has no villains that actually challenge him anymore, and all his corporate sponsors are pulling out. So he gets what is it? It's Casanova Frankenstein, which is it's a good name. Anyway, he gets Casanova Frankenstein released, so he can have a big villain to fight again. And it does make you think, like, is he kind of lost it because he hasn't been pushed for so long?
Yeah, I mean that is something that I hadn't really considered, but yeah, I do think that character could have been a bit more explored, and you know it's interesting to kind of see the dynamic of the underworld of the city sort of around Frankenstein's return as well.
The very stereotypical gangs that he recruits.
Yeah.
And I love that it's not just like stereotypical minorities. There's a couple of them in there, but it's like the fraternity
the frat
boys.
Yeah. So it's like it's not really, they're not really gangs. It's just different cliques of people.
Yeah. I did enjoy kind of the fight between the disco boys. The first fight between the disco boys and the mystery men, where they're just calling them out on having guns and weapons that aren't in any way disco themed.
Yeah, and also I like the initial fight when they're in the house towards the end, and the disco gang are not. They're not actually fighting. They're just disco dancing.
Yeah, like they're blocking his path, like doing the Staying Alive kind
Yeah.
of.
Yeah. So it is. I do like the kind of stupidity of the humour that's sort of littered through the film. I think that Sphinx is quite a funny character.
Yeah, when Furious is just calling out his empty like wise words. He predicts exactly what he's gonna say. It's a great moment.
And his answer is just not necessarily.
Yeah.
Were you going to say this? Not necessarily.
Yeah.
I like the fact that there is nobody in this film, like not even a Captain Amazing, who is remotely serious.
Yeah.
Like it's there is no precedent set for the characters, and that's why I think the film gets to kind of fall as far as the spleen.
Yeah.
And the idea that you've got Invisible Boy who can only turn invisible when people don't look at him, even when he doesn't look at himself.
Yeah.
Like he can't look at himself and become invisible.
That's a great bit. Like that's just everyone, and then it actually he is invisible because he doesn't get spotted by the like robotic weapon.
Yeah. So it's just kind of like those silly the characters and those moments that the film almost kind of gives itself permission to go there because it doesn't set any serious precedent from the beginning. I mean, the first event is like it's a heist in an old folks' home dinner party.
Yeah, it's like a bingo hall or something.
Yeah, it just all seems a little bit absurd from the get-go.
Yeah, it as I say, it feels very much like kind of Batman Forever. Just stick this in here, why not? It makes sense. The only thing it was missing was like 500 times more neon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the closest thing they get to a kind of serious character is the bowler, who obviously has this kind of revenge mission to find her father's killer. Although, does have, for me, the funniest line in the film, which is the police ruled it an accident. He fell down an elevator shaft onto some bullets.
Yeah. What I like about her character is that there's kind of this slight discord between typical comic book hero villain, got the drive to wreak revenge on her parents' killer, and it's kind of very typical, and then her speaking to a bowling ball and clearly looking like she's losing her head.
Yeah. So, like, the first time you meet her when they're doing the tryouts, you get her walking and she's kind of, like, almost seems like the one who's together, knows what they're doing. And then, she gets brought in and Furious is annoyed. But then, cut to the car and she starts talking to a skull in a bowling ball and you're like, okay, she's just as weird as everyone else.
Yeah.
It's like one scene you think she's normal and then nope.
Yeah. Actually, I'm glad you mentioned the car, because the scene where they pass Frankenstein's limo and decide to face up to him, for me is just highlights how idiotic this whole film is, because ultimately what happens is they corner him in the car and the whole film could end there.
Yeah.
But all they end up doing is vandalising the car and running off.
Yeah, they just annoy him a bit. And it's like they're celebrating it like a major victory and they just let him get away.
And you've got Blue Raja like scratching the side of the car with his fork, and like you've got Mr. Furious on top of the car like stamping his feet, and it very much makes sense until you realise that all they've done is try and scratch his car up and then they've run off. And that for me was kind of just summed up the whole film.
Yeah, I can see that. And I love the fact that it's like for a bunch of them, it's like a genuine moment of doing stuff right. Like Shoveler does some like quite good stuff, where he fires Furious onto the roof, and Blue Raja when he throws the fork into the car and locks the doors.
Yeah.
They're being quite successful, and then they do nothing with it.
Yeah. And it's almost like that setup, and then there's no punchline, which is, I mean, that happens constantly throughout the film, and you see it with somebody like Furious all the time, where he builds himself up, and you're kind of constantly going, is this it? Is this when he's going to get angry? And then nothing. And like, I mean, in this scene where he just ends up resorting to trying to pick the badge off the front of the car because he can't do anything else. At all. Yeah, and he's just trying to dismantle the logo off the bonnet, and not succeeding. And it that kind of the idea of building up the story and then watching them fail speaks to the whole film, really. So I think there are themes in it, and there are kind of running patterns in it that work really well.
Yeah, 100%. One thing I do want to touch on, for a couple of reasons, is the tryouts that they have. First and foremost, because Pencilhead in it is played by Doug Jones, who is Abe Sapien in Hellboy. Another Hellboy connection.
Okay, that's very for a start. That's very niche. Was he already an established actor by then, or was that just kind of like a bit part that he happened to get and then he went from there?
I think he was still an up and comer at this point. Like he
Right.
had some bit part roles, but nothing as big as when he started appearing in Hellboy and stuff.
Yeah, as an actor, former actor, I do love kind of seeing those stories and seeing that development from film to film for actors. So that's a nice little tidbit there.
Yeah. The other thing I kind of want to talk about is it feels like this scene was done so much better in Deadpool 2. And this is kind of a question I have. I was going to maybe bring it up in the post-production, but let's just discuss it now. Was this film just too ahead of its time?
That's actually a very interesting question. I hadn't thought of it in those terms.
Yeah, so my kind of take on it is they made a film that in a large way kind of spoofs and sends up superhero films right before kind of the first boom of superhero films. Like this comes, I think maybe Blade had come out, but we wouldn't get the X-Men till next year. We wouldn't get like Ang Lee's Hulk, Fantastic Four, all of these until the 2000s. And then obviously the much, much bigger explosion of superhero films was over 10 years later, as we get into Iron Man in 2008 up to Avengers in 2012, really kicking it all off. And that's maybe why something like Deadpool works so well, because it came at the right time where superhero films were the dominant media in Hollywood, and this kind of just predates superhero films being such a big deal.
Right, I see. So the kind of material to satirise was almost not there.
Yeah, and I mean, you kind of see it. It didn't do well at the box office. It flopped. It performed really badly with audiences. And were they just not kind of aware enough of superhero tropes? I'm sure some of them will have got the whole joke around, oh, you can obviously tell that Clark Kent is Superman. You can tell that Lance is Captain Amazing. But it wasn't so widely talked about it is now, where that's just of course it's the most obvious thing in the world. And there are kind of lots of little jokes like that, all these terrible superheroes is kind of a scene that was better done in Deadpool 2, and I just wonder if they might have been better holding off, because the only thing that they've really had at this point to mock was the Batman films, and that's kind of
which were satirical enough in themselves to some extent.
Well, I think by the time this came out, the Batman films had moved from being good films to a joke.
So it was almost like their job had been done for them.
Yeah.
By the time you got to Mystery Men. Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean that's a really interesting way to put it, and I think possibly like when you speak about it in that way, I think yeah, might well have done because you kind of see. I mean, you've got those classic superheroes like Batman, like Superman, and they're kind of things like their origin stories and stuff. They don't change, you know. Like they're pretty consistent from kind of film to film and one reimagination of the franchise to the next. So finding comedy in those sort of setups is not that wouldn't work because it is almost formulaic.
Yeah, and as we say, like we mentioned, like the bowler's origin story, it is almost a funny take on the classic superhero revenge origin story. The spleen's origin story where he farts on a gypsy on a gypsy woman who walked past her and she curses him.
I mean, that kind of has scent of fairy tale about it as well.
But I mean, I think magic curses are a thing in comic books as well.
Yeah, I guess that goes back to what I was saying, that like those kind of recipes for superheroes and that kind of construct is so consistent from one superhero to the next that the satirical take on it can't really go wrong. I think the thing that potentially would let it down is its timing.
Yeah, and I think the best moments in the film are the moments that kind of send up your traditional, more serious superhero films. And they might just have been lost on audiences that weren't so tapped into superhero culture. I imagine people who were, comic book fans probably quite enjoyed this film when it came out, but that was a much nicher kind of section of society back in 1999 or 97 whenever this came out. I don't remember.
And I guess that's almost why it would be more commercially successful now, is because obviously that whole genre has been pushed so heavily into the mainstream that it's kind of more of it. That understanding would be a whole lot broader.
Yeah, 100%. Avengers was for a year or so the highest grossing film of all time. It's just been re-overtaken because Avatar got a Chinese re-release, and I'm sure that Disney's very upset with that, given that they own both properties. But yeah, it's the biggest deal out there. Superhero films make a ton of money, and everyone sees them now. Well, nearly everyone.
Yeah.
So everyone's familiar with the tropes.
Yeah, I think what is interesting is that, I mean, we can't pretend that this film isn't wholly designed to poke fun at superhero films, like that's entirely what it's there to do.
Yeah.
And actually, if you look back, especially more recently, if you look back at films like Deadpool or Iron Man and the Avengers films and stuff, and even things like Venom and some of the writing in films like Wonder Woman and stuff, they're kind of written to do that themselves as well. I think that humour has kind of naturally been woven into the fabric of a superhero film now. I mean, you look at Robert Downey Jr. playing Iron Man, and there's so many bits of humour, and it's almost like it's meant to poke fun. Like you look at Black Panther and the kind of the suits of armour and the different gadgets and stuff. It's all almost kind of making fun of the whole superhero genre. So I think that sort of the power to create a film that's wholly like that has almost been taken away because it's so kind of now interwoven with writing a superhero film. Now I think that's definitely kind of a Marvel Disney thing that's happened, and I think that's kind of proven in the way that seeing Edward Norton's reimagination of Hulk not working in line with the Marvel franchise, and like famously he wanted to kind of model his performance on Christopher Nolan's Batman films, and which are more serious, and it didn't work, and that's something that he kind of clashed heads with the producers about, and so you see that kind of humor naturally just coming into those films, and ultimately kind of, if you look at somebody like Iron Man being at the heart of the character as well, so you don't necessarily have that same flexibility to create something that is only designed to poke fun.
I agree and disagree. I think a lot of the humor in, like, you look at the Marvel films is not necessarily about poking fun at superhero films. It's more about, being quippy. Like, it's about getting in the little one-liner, and it's not necessarily kind of meta commentary on superhero films, or take this superhero trope and make it idiotic in the way that this film is, or that, like, Deadpool is.
Yeah, I understand that, and I would agree. I think the point at which I would push back on that would be the comedy that is kind of written in basically means that these superheroes don't have such a hard shell. They don't take it themselves as seriously, so it's not as easy in a way to kind of to make fun of them. You look at someone like Furious in Mystery Men, it's not actually about his origin story so much, and it's not about the sort of conventions of him being a superhero. It's the character themselves that they poke fun at, and I think because these big superheroes that are around now, they are able to do that themselves. That doesn't leave so much room for somebody else to do that.
Okay, I can kind of see what you're saying, but for me, that's not necessarily where this movie will its strongest. But yeah, I get where you're coming from for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have loads left to say about this film. Like, I think it's a fairly easy watch. You have your laughs. Some of it's just really stupid. Some of it doesn't make sense at all. And some of it still bears relevance today, like me being able to kind of compare Captain Amazing to Homelander, who is kind of has only been this sort of reimagination of what it is to be a superhero in the last couple of years, like that kind of the corruption that somebody facing that level of fame and power, etc., would potentially kind of engage in. Yeah, it's just an easily enjoyable film, really. It's not the best film in the world. It's certainly not the best film that we've kind of spoken about on this podcast, or even this season, or even in the last 2 episodes. but it's an easy watch, and this was definitely something that I kind of had really fond memories of watching with my dad, and this is definitely kind of a little bit like his sort of stupid humour, probably edging more towards Monty Python, which we will certainly be talking about. Not this film, my dad's humour.
Okay, yes.
Which we almost certainly will be, well, not almost, we will be talking about at some point.
Yeah.
But I have fond memories of kind of laughing with my dad at the Spleen and how stupid it was, and and Invisible Boy, who couldn't turn invisible. Like it's stupid but fun and funny and fine to watch.
Yeah, I am a similar kind of place to you. I think the film is a pretty averagely made film in terms of quality, but there are laughs in there. The comedic talent that the film's got is undeniable. And they definitely brought a lot of great one-liners. Like the Blue Raja talking about being a master of cutlery, and then someone's like, but you don't even use knives. Like, the most useful bit of cutlery. And when the shoveler brings out a little trowel at the end.
Yeah, I love that. Like, that did make me laugh.
There's a lot of great small moments that are very funny, and a lot of good, like, comedic commentary on superheroes. I enjoy when the shoveler's like got a couple of where he's trying to put imaginary glasses onto Captain Amazing to see if he looks like Lance, because only Furious can see that they're clearly the same person.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's plenty of good laughs in there. I don't think that the film around those necessarily is outstanding, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think it doesn't try to be, and not by any stretch is it the best film in the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, an enjoyable one.
Yeah. So a little bit of post-production to wrap it up. The film actually got delayed a week because they wanted to avoid competing with the Blair Witch Project, which I imagine when this was announced was not on there, like, you know, in their eyes a big threat, and then the marketing campaign for that film was insanely good. So they delayed it a week to avoid opening at the same time. Even with that, it ended up opening at number 6 on the US box office, and it ended up massively bombing. It only made It made less than half its budget.
Ouch.
Yeah, the reviews were a bit better than that. They were generally kind of mixed, leaning towards positive, probably like where we are. Particularly positive towards all the comedic performances. Yeah, there isn't much else to say. No awards of any kind.
Yeah, I'm glad that, like, even though the film wasn't kind of recognised as the masterpiece that it wasn't, like, I'm glad that the actors still got their due. You know, like, they got the recognition they deserved, and there were good performances in there. And as you said at the beginning, it's a brilliant cast.
Yeah,
and it makes it a whole lot more watchable.
So I'm not sure, like, I haven't found any, like, tangible evidence of this, but it feels like, to a degree, it's become a little bit of a cult classic. Like, people who maybe a little older than us who kind of grew up with it, because, you know, we'd have been, like, 4 or 5 when it came out. Maybe people who were a little bit older and saw it. They're now...
Yeah, I mean,
it
certainly has that kind of air about it, doesn't it? I mean, I don't know either, but, you know, it does. It seems, as a film, seems to possess the qualities that you see in those cult classics now. The kind of absurdity of it, the little kind of niche sort of details that, and, you know, it does have that sort of quality about it.
Yeah. And that's all I've got on that. So,
cool. So it's your pick for the next episode.
It is, and as I've said, I'm doing kind of a favourite characters theme to this season. And this week we're going with Lieutenant Aldo Rain.
Ooh,
that's right. It's Inglourious
lovely
Basterds.
Stuff. I love this film so much.
Yeah.
I think it was on my list as well.
I got in there before you then.
Yeah, we got a good mention in the last episode, didn't it?
In
or the episode before.
Yeah, a couple weeks ago. When we were talking about opening scenes. Yeah, that's going to be. I'm looking forward to rewatching it. It's my favourite Tarantino. So yeah, I'm very excited to revisit.
Yeah, I mean, it is phenomenal. This is where I first saw Christoph Waltz, and
this is the first time most people saw Christoph Waltz.
Yeah, and my gosh, is it good?
Yeah,
very excited to watch that. Nice, good choice. Okay, so yeah, I've got a little closer for us.
Cool.
And just kind of going off the back of, you know, we've had a couple of episodes talking about superhero films, and two maybe less obvious choices, I think, for the first 2 superhero films we've done. But yeah, I wanted to kind of ask you what your favourite superhero series is.
Oh, series. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Oof. Immediately, we are the Nostalgia Bubble podcast. For pure nostalgia, it's Smallville.
Okay.
I think it was around kind of sixth form. I binge watched most of Smallville. It's kind of what made me fall in love with Superman as a character. The fact that, you know, there is more depth to him than just being this all-powerful figure. And then from that, I kind of learnt what actually makes Superman interesting is the fact that he is this kind of all-powerful figure, and it's his restraint and his humanity holding him back from that makes him more interesting. So yeah, I adore Smallville. Tom Welling, fantastic. Michael Rosenbaum's Lex Luthor is one of the great performances in superhero media. And then you get, like, you know, there's all the kind of the DC series, Arrow, Flash, Supergirl, which I think all 3 of those were good for 2 seasons, and then on all 3, the 3rd season really dropped off for me. Season 2 of Arrow I particularly love. I haven't actually watched all of Legends of Tomorrow, but sometimes I see it and it looks insane, and I'm like, why am I not watching this show?
Yeah, I like what I like about superhero series is exactly what you kind of spoke about with Smallville, is that like, you know, you get to explore more of the characters, not just about kind of one venture
Yeah.
that they go on, or kind of one huge sort of conflict that they have to endure. You know, you get to explore the sort of ins and outs, and you really get. I mean, I've always enjoyed the superhero films that have that origin element to it. This is one of the things, and possibly one of the only things that I like about the old Spider-Man films, is that, you know, you get the origin story, and for some, I don't know why it is, but I just kind of really enjoy that element of it, and so I guess being able to explore that a little more in these series is something. I guess it just kind of is definitely something that kind of appeals to me personally. I think this is kind of what, you know, why films like The Joker are so successful, is because you kind of see the origin, you know, of a character that you wouldn't necessarily expect to see. Obviously the Joker itself is such a kind of, is a monumental role, you know, it's such a classic role, and you see the investment that people put into that role and the weight that role carries, and there's pressure on every actor that plays it. But, you know, I think that's just one element of why I thought it was such a successful film. But that's what I enjoy about series as well. Having said that, my favourite series, my favourite superhero series is actually not one that involves much of an origin story. You just get a lot of background, and it's The Punisher.
Okay, so I was gonna say, I've talked about a lot of DC. I was gonna then bring up Marvel. For me, the best superhero series, and probably my second favorite, is Daredevil. That's the one of the like the six Netflix shows that for me was consistent in quality, like always, you know, 9 or 10 out of 10. You're like Jessica Jones and Luke Cage both had really strong first seasons and then dropped off a little bit.
Yeah.
Iron Fist was always terrible. Second season of Iron Fist was better. Defenders was good when the characters were interacting, and very dull the rest of the time. For me, Punisher, it didn't like it dragged in a lot of the first season. I haven't seen the second yet.
Okay, you introduced me to Daredevil, and that for me was a fantastic first series. I really enjoyed it, and obviously in season 2, I think you become acquainted with the Punisher.
He's mainly in the first half of season 2, but he does have some stuff to do in the second half as well. Yeah,
and as an actor, I really like John Bernthal.
Oh, John Bernthal is outstanding. I just thought the rest of the Punisher show around him was fine.
I think he's incredible. He's not a superhero. He's just this very tough dude, and I think I quite enjoyed that element of it.
Yeah, I can see that.
But yeah, so that for me, I think that's the one that I've enjoyed the most consistently, and maybe it is also because I just love John Bernthal. And Daredevil was good, really good. I felt like season 3. I started season 3 and it didn't pick up quickly enough for me. So
that's fair. It is a slow burn.
Yeah, I didn't watch it all, but I think maybe I should watch it all.
I definitely recommend it. I think it is fantastic.
Yeah.
I want to give a shout out. I really loved WandaVision. As of recording this, we're like part way through Falcon and Winter Soldier, and for me that's not as good. It's far more kind of just conventional. It feels like 24 or something like that, rather than like it's not doing anything interesting with being a superhero show at this point. I'm hoping that will pick up.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of great things about WandaVision, so I need to watch it.
It gets a bit weird, and I dig weird stuff. I feel like I have to give a shout out to like Batman the animated series and like X-Men the animated series, Teen Titans. Like these are some incredible animated superhero shows that are out there. And I know so many people who love them, so I think they should get a shout out as well.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And you can find the podcast on iTunes, on Google Podcasts, on Spotify, on Podbean, and on YouTube. You can follow us at Nostalgia Bubble on Twitter and at Nostalgia Bubble Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. You can follow me at Shuggy Says on almost all social media, and I'm at Shuggy Plays on Twitch. And Nye?
You can follow me on Twitter at Nyrees, Nyerrees, and on Instagram at ReeseNye.
And we'll see you for Inglourious Bastards next week. Bye-bye.
See ya.